This takes place sometime around the summer of '09 or 2010. I, a 25-year-old female, was about 14 or 15 years old at this time. My family wasn't super financially well off, but my dad managed to pull together a family camping trip to Savannah, GA. Though Savannah was home to the most beautiful of beaches, it was a beach that held a lot of sentimental value too. I remember camping on Tybee Island many times as a kid. I was over the moon excited to be going back for the first time since I was a much smaller kid, and this time I was getting to bring my best friend too. The weekend had never looked more enticing. So the trip started off normal enough. We got to the campsite and my dad started to set up his tent. My oldest brother and his girlfriend were just hanging out, my other older brother busy exploring the site. And my friend and I, we were just hanging out at the picnic table near the rather small tent. After everything was set up and we were all just sort of hanging out relaxing, as it was already getting late by this time, it might be worth mentioning too that I come from a 420 friendly household, so please refrain from judgment, but anyway, we were just chilling and smoking when our camp neighbor pops out from his tent. He must have smelled our ganja too, so he came over and introduced himself. His name was Dan. He was about mid-50s, I would guess, around 6 foot, give or take an inch or two. About ear-length, wavy, sort of greasy-looking grey hair. Kinda made my skin crawl a bit, but whatever. So Dan comes up and introduces himself and asks to smoke with us. My friend and I, we didn't really partake in the group chat as we just didn't really care, like most teen girls wouldn't. So we just conversed amongst ourselves close by so we could still smoke, but far enough that we wouldn't have to engage in conversation with Dan. I wasn't too worried as I had my 2 older brothers and my dad there to protect us. One thing about the middle oldest brother too is that he was a bit of a wild child who would probably kill this guy if he tried anything funny. But regardless, I was still aware of just how much Buddy gave me the heebie-jeebies. However, he didn't try anything, so I guess that was cool. Just sort of played guitar with my dad and oldest brother until we all decided to crash. Now, that night my friend and I decided to sleep on the picnic table. The tent with my dad felt too small and we felt too cool to share one with him. One of my brothers was already sleeping in the car too, and my oldest brother took off with his girlfriend to go sleep on the beach. So we decided, well, to heck with it. Let's just sleep on the table. That was a bad idea. We spent the whole night getting eaten by mosquitoes and feeling like we were being watched. Yeah, it was honestly terrible, and 10 out of 10 would not recommend. But we slept in the car the rest of the trip, which was okay, I guess. Anyway, the next morning, Dan popped up on us again as we were smoking a morning bowl while readying ourselves to go and get breakfast. My dad, being the total gent that he is, invites Dan to come along too. At this point, he seemed normal enough, I suppose. Stinky, but nice enough. He never said anything weird to me or my friend too, but I could just feel that something was off about him. But again, I felt safe with my brothers and my dad around. I felt like just the appearance of my dad would be enough to make him steer clear of us, to be honest. My dad's really tall and looks pretty fit, covered in tattoos with long hair and several facial piercings too. Total metalhead, but a guy with a big heart. So breakfast started off normal. We're all baked and just sort of giggling away, enjoying our scrumptious breakfast, when all of a sudden Dan pipes up. He starts talking about the show Hannah Montana too. We all exchange glances like, is this grown man really raving about a tween television series? So we all just sort of sit back and listen. Dan goes on about how beautiful Miley Cyrus is, how much he hates the character Oliver, and how cool the character Lily was. We're all just sort of looking at each other like WTF when the real dinger gets thrown out there. This guy, this poor delusional man, starts telling us that he's in a relationship with Miley. That when she has a love interest in the show, that it's really just a subliminal message that she's sending to him. That her lyrics and her music are all about him. We obviously didn't question it because we're all pretty clear now that this guy is way off his rocker, so what would be the point? Instead, we all just sort of nod our heads and hurry up on finishing up our breakfast. Nobody even had to say what we were all thinking, so we just tried to kind of shrug him off as he approached us again. We all kind of caught on to how weird he was pretty quickly, and everyone just kind of steered clear of him from then on. Later that day too, after we digested our food a bit and relaxed and smoked and whatnot, all that good stuff, well, we all decided to go and hit the beach. The part that we went to was near a pier and a bunch of shops, so my friend and I decided to wander around and get a little time away from all of the testosterone. We roam the shops a little bit and pick out some cute necklaces and the works, and then decide to head on over to the pier. Now, the entrance of the pier had this little sort of gazebo thing with tables and drink machines and stuff, and my friend and I decided that we were going to go and plant our little butts there and sort of cool off a bit. So we're just sort of chilling there, talking about normal teen stuff, when I spot Dan sitting just a couple of tables behind ours. Well, my friend was sitting with her back towards Dan's direction, so I quietly let her know that Dan was there watching us, and we should probably skedaddle at this point. We get up and start heading towards the beach. We get off the pier and make it to the beach, and we think we're in the clear. We hadn't seen him get up after this, but of course, we were dead wrong. Long after entering the beach part of the area, we peeped that he's been walking behind us. Not too close, but close enough that it's blatantly obvious that he is indeed following us. We silently come up with a plan, just in case he gets a hold of us, and we agree that we should jump him if he tried anything. We were two small teen girls, but my friend, she had attended kickboxing classes regularly for years, and she thought at the very least that she would be able to do something if he attacked us. I guess she made me feel brave and unafraid. The best kind of friend to have in a situation like this, I suppose, but like I said, we were two very small teen girls, so really, we didn't really stand a chance. Anyway, as unafraid as I may have been at the time, I still knew that our best shot would be finding either one of my brothers or my dad. Fortunately for us, we saw my brother and his girlfriend relaxing on the beach not too far ahead, so we hurried on up to them and Dan veered off somewhere else. But once we were sure that he was gone, we started telling my brother about Dan following us. He was clearly bothered by this, but just told us to stay near and keep an eye out. Let him know too if he says anything weird, and that was that. We had no idea if he wanted to snatch us up or simply just followed us around to talk further about Miley Cyrus. I don't recall seeing Dan again that night or on our last day there either. His gear was gone by the morning too, and we all sort of breathed a collective sigh of relief because, well, let's be real. However sad it may be that he was so very clearly mentally ill, Dan was really weird. And we were all pretty stoked to spend our last day without him. Our last day was great too. We all had a blast and Dan never came back, so we just packed up and waved goodbye to Savannah as we all laughed and discussed all the crazy stuff that Dan had said on that trip. We could all agree that this seemingly super nice and normal middle-aged man had given us a trip to remember, that's for sure. But there's more to this story. So, after about a week or so of being home, my dad's watching the news when guess who pops up on the screen? You guessed it. Headlined, Miley Cyrus Stalker arrested in Savannah, GA after trying to gain access to studio, or something along those lines, was the news report. And it was 100% him. No mistaking it, as they said his name and listed our vacancy weekend in Savannah as the time and the place of his arrest and everything. And of course, the picture solidified any prior doubts too. It was him. So, during that weekend when he wasn't with us, he was apparently actively stalking Miley Cyrus and was apparently arrested for trying to get into the studio or whatever that she was filming at. And that's why he wasn't there on that last day. So, we decided, screw it, let's just Google this guy's name up. And it turns out that wasn't the first time that he had been arrested for stalking him. Dan had been arrested in a couple of different states as he had been following her around the country. He genuinely believed that they were in love. We found a video of him on YouTube being interviewed by some news dude. Different incident than the Savannah arrest. Dan was talking about how he was there to see Miley and that he was going to ask her to marry him. He looked so jittery and excited, like someone who was truly excited to propose to the love of their life would be. I think that's the part too that weirded me out the most. He really and truly believed it with all of his heart. And that, my friends, is terrifying to say the least. So, there you have it, guys. The story of my camping trip with the official Miley Cyrus Stalker. I changed his name, obviously, as I'm not certain of the rules here as far as naming criminals goes, but a simple Google search should suffice for anyone who's truly curious. As a last thought, though, I'll leave you with this. So, I kept wondering why Dan was drawn to my friend and I, and recently, as I relayed this story to a friend, something really dawned on me. Hannah Montana, or Miley on the show, was a brunette, and her best friend Lily was a blonde. I was brunette, and my friend was also blonde. So, what if he actually saw us and had some sort of a weird thought of us being like them or something? I don't know. It could be a bit of a stretch, but my mind was a bit blown when I thought about it. Anyway, that's about it, and I hope you enjoyed my story. It's one I always like telling people because it's just so what the heck, right? My friend and I are still super close, and it's something that gets brought up at least once or twice a year, either with her or with my family. It's a memory to last a lifetime for all involved, so I guess we can say that at least we have that. When I was much younger and far less concerned with consequences, I was introduced to a guy through a mutual friend that was well connected. It took me forever to figure out how this guy could stock a veritable roving pharmacy in his vehicle, but at the time I wasn't so much concerned with the how, just the when. Like, hey man, when can I purchase an irresponsible amount of diverted prescription medications from you? As I got to know him more, though, I learned more about my purveyor of happy pills, and he thoroughly threw off a really bad vibe. In fact, I would do my absolute best to avoid the post-deal hangout, but the guy was clearly and completely socially inept. Eventually, Dealer, I'll henceforth refer to him as D, starts attempting to insinuate himself into my group or friends more and more. He would call me constantly, text me like an abandoned Tinder date, and generally just harass me to hang out. We would be casually drinking beer in the backyard of my house, and he'd happen to be in the neighborhood, just like he'd accidentally take a load off and decide to stick around. Now, I'm not a complete jerk, so it was difficult to sell someone a clue who doesn't have a proverbial nickel to his name. I specifically remember a night when each of us were recounting macho stories of tussles and scrapes that we'd been in, and D decided that it was his turn to contribute, and it went something like, "Oh, that's nothing, man. One time I shot a man in the face with a short-off shotgun and beat the rap on self-defense technicalities." We all sort of went slack-jawed at this moment and nodded our heads, mumbling uncomfortably, "Wow, pretty cool." At that point, though, I think we all just assumed that he was a one-upper and would say whatever to reinforce the tough guy persona that he was so desperate to have us believe. I should have realized then, though, that maybe D wasn't exactly an asset to the societal fabric. But, you know, I didn't want to hurt the guy's feelings, plus drugs, right? A few weeks later into the summer, though, some of the boys and I decided to tie one on and head downtown to the clubs. Now, I know for a fact that I hadn't committed the felonious sin of imparting knowledge of our physical location to D, but somehow he materialized by my side as I was ordering a drink. Even in my own greatly impaired state, I could tell D was in a knee-walking, gutter-sucking blackout. It took me all of 30 seconds of surveying his slack expression, coupled with his glassy black eyes, doing the 1,000-yard stare, to surmise that D was not going to be a fun man to be around this night. And my hypothesis soon proved all too accurate too, when he began pushing random people on the dance floor, accosting women in front of their respective boyfriends and husbands, all the while fiddling around in his pockets for something. Perhaps you're starting to see why D wasn't a pillar of social proficiency. Eventually, though, he was ejected from the club, and as a mission of pure mercy, I went outside to make sure that he at least found a cab home. That's when I discovered what D was looking for in his pockets all night. As I walked outside, I could see several bouncers surrounding this guy, and he was brandishing a 6-inch serrated fold-out knife at them. I still have no idea what possessed me to step in and corral him, and I still believe the only reason I wasn't cut to absolute ribbons is because of the Gumpy-like flexibility I'm afforded under the influence of alcohol and prescription medications. But I was finally able to convince him into a taxi, and I sent him packing. And it was at that point that I made a firm decision to stop doing drugs, and by proxy, stop seeing D. Ever. I blocked his number even, and refused to go out. It's lucky that I did too, because some months later, he found himself once again in a scuffle at that very same establishment. Only this time, I wasn't there to rescue him. And he stabbed a man 7 or 8 times, and hot-footed it into an alley in some sort of pitiful attempt at an escape. The police didn't have to do much sleuthing, as there were plenty of bystanders willing to point out his location. And D is now in a level 4 prison, and isn't eligible for parole for another decade or so. And I say, good.